How many of you have ever had one of those days? You know the kind I'm talking about where nothing goes right? You know, it starts out bad and kind of goes downhill from there. You know, you wake up in the morning and find out that your coffee pot just died. You know, you're so looking forward to that morning cup of coffee and zip. Or you rush out to your car, you're already struggling to get to work on time, you're behind schedule, you find out the battery's dead. Or you're greeted with a flat tire. We all have those times when things just don't go our way, and sometimes those days can turn into, one of those weeks, one of those months, or even more than that. Months of frustration and fear that we encounter sometimes in our lives when we or maybe a loved one is struggling with health or financial issues. Where blocks of time just kind of pass by, leaving you, kind of feeling like you've been stuck in a loop from that old comedy variety show from the late 60s and 70s. You know the one I'm talking about, Hee Haw? There's a recurring bit in there where these two guys get up and they exchange jokes about how bad their lives were, and then they'd kind of sing their theme song. You know the one I'm talking about? Gloom, if it weren't for bad luck, I'd have no luck at all. Gloom, despair, and agony on me. It was a funny bit, but it's not so funny when you're going through difficult times. And the truth is that many of us have experienced those difficult times in our lives, and if you haven't yet, you will. You will. Because difficult times are just really a facet of human life on this earth. We all experience them, and sometimes they get to be a bit much. And they seem like they're more than we can handle, and sometimes they really are, because we're finite beings. We have limited abilities, limited strength, and hard times can wear down even the strongest among us. They can. The Isaiah passage that I started out with today, that we read earlier, reminds us of that truth. That even the strongest can struggle. Most scholars believe that the section of Isaiah that this passage came from was most likely directed at the people who were then living out their lives in exile, right? They had been forcibly uprooted from their homes in Judea and carted off to a foreign land amidst foreign people where they were kind of under the thumb of the foreigners. They lived there as kind of an underclass. And it was difficult. I mean, you talk about having a bad day. They were having bad decades. And they felt powerless to overcome their hard times. They felt powerless to overcome the government that was basically oppressing them. And they didn't have the ability to fix this problem on their own. And a lot of them may very well have felt that they had been abandoned and just utterly forgotten by God. It happens. Difficult times have a way of setting you up for an outlook like that. When your world just closes in on you and all you see is your pain, it's easy to forget lost or abandoned or forgotten. That's part of who we are. That's how we react to pain stimuli. We kind of close in. But the truth is that we're never forgotten. We're never abandoned. God had not abandoned or forgotten those Judeans. And to remind them, to give them this message of hope, God sends them this message that we read from today. And again, he mentions the reality that we have finite strength, right? When he says youths will become tired and weary, young men will certainly stumble. Even the very strongest among us are going to come to a point when our human strength is just not sufficient. But the Isaiah passage reminds us that we have more to rely on than just our human strength. God, speaking to the people through the prophet, reminds them that the Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He doesn't grow tired or weary. His understanding is beyond human reach, giving power to the tired and reviving the exhausted. we're reminded that God always was. God is. God always will be. God doesn't go away. Ever. God's strength, God's love, God's grace do not and will not fade or diminish. Ever. And even when we can't understand why things are the way they are, even when we don't know what we should do next, God's greater understanding of all things does see the big picture. Sees the big picture of the plans that God has for us. Each of us. Isaiah talks about looking up and seeing the stars in the sky and realizing that God created all of those, more than we can count. That he calls them out. God knows who we are. We are never, ever forgotten. God has plans for us. Not plans for destruction or abandonment, but plans for salvation. Plans for time to spend together. And God will take care of what we can't. God has that ability to do things we can't. We see this passage of Mark, sometimes we kind of skip by it and we don't think there's a lot there for us, but we see glimpses of who God is in this passage as well as others in the gospel. We see, of course, his healing ability, that he can restore things that we cannot, but we see something else too. You know, we read of how Jesus healed Peter's mother-in-law and then how he healed all those people who came to him with their problems. And God is showing us there that God does have the power to overcome problems that are beyond our human means to overcome, but that's not all. Because think about this for a moment. Think about this. In each and every case in our gospel lesson today, and pretty much everywhere else in the gospel accounts, Jesus willingly sets aside whatever he was doing, to help or to heal people. Read through the gospel accounts. That guy got interrupted more times than you can count. He'd be going somewhere, and somebody would interrupt what he was doing to come take care of this, and sometimes while he was taking care of that interruption, he'd get interrupted again. And yet every single time, Jesus set aside what he was doing to bring healing to people who had done nothing to earn that favorable treatment. A lot of those people had never seen Jesus before. They came to him for help, and yet he healed them anyway. You see, that's grace. That's that churchy term that we like to throw out there. But that's God deliberately doing for us what we cannot do for ourselves, even when we have done nothing to earn that favor. God heals us, God cares for us, God redeems us, not because of what we have done, but because of who God is. We see that illustrated time and again in the gospel accounts, and we need to realize that God hasn't changed since that time passed. God is still in the business of healing us. He doesn't grow tired of us. He loves us, each one of us, with an amazing, matchless intensity, and he will take care of us. God's going to do that because that's who God is. He's not going to go away. Doesn't matter how icky our lives are, God is still God, and he still loves you just as much as ever he did, and he will take care of you. So when those days happen, or those times happen, when they come and you feel utterly powerless to really overcome the obstacles that are before you, or when you just don't even know how to cope, remember something important. You are loved. You are loved by God. You are loved by God so much so that he's already made it possible for you to be raised up from death to everlasting life. It's a done deal. Nobody's going to stop that. Even the very worst that this world can dish out to you cannot overcome what God yearns to do for you and with you. Remember that. Hang on to that hope. Scripture reminds us again today that those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will fly up on wings like eagles. They will run and not be tired. They will walk and not be weary. The truth is that as people of faith, we are both hope-filled and hope-fueled. Hope gives us the power, the strength to carry on when our own resources are not enough.